incorporating that in our parenting. So those are the few things coming up. And so now I want to introduce Dr. Farhat Chaudhry, who joined us today. She is a doctor of psychology and a licensed marriage and family therapist. She has a private practice in Newport Beach and Anaheim Hills. She has extensive experience working with individuals, families, children, young adults, and seniors. She has worked with clients who have experienced anxiety, domestic violence, depression, divorce, co-parenting, grief and loss, disordered eating, child abuse trauma, and addiction issues, among others. Dr. Chaudhry has assisted in developing psychological assessments for children and adolescents, as well as assessments for postpartum depression. She uses multiple therapeutic strategies to create a compassionate and collaborative space for her clients' growth. She has extensively worked within the Muslim community using an Islamic foundation to frame her clients' development. She has taught several master's and doctoral level psychology classes and is also a researcher and has conducted 20 research projects inclusive of multicultural research on couples, parenting, and issues pertaining to power, gender, and equality. Other topics of her research are related to the bridging of psychological and medical issues of fibromyalgia and postpartum depression. She has presented her research at institutions such as Columbia University, University of Atlanta, and many national conferences. Her dedication to research and her therapeutic work with her patients exemplifies her passion for the field of psychotherapy. And mashallah, Dr. Farhat has 4 kids who have gone through New Horizon. I've known her for many years, and mashallah, she is an amazing woman, and we're so excited to have her today. We're gonna have her do the presentation. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. Mona and I will go through the questions, and we will forward these on to Dr. Farhat to answer at the very end of the session. Okay, thank you. Welcome. We need to unmute her, Mona.
I was muted. Thank you, Munira. Thank you, New Horizon, for the opportunity.
We've had to put so many things off.
For me. So today we're talking about managing anxiety in our children. I'm going to do just an overview and then give some symptomology so we can begin to recognize some of these things in our children, and then coping skills along with that, some strategies on how to help. And then we'll follow up with question and answers, okay? So anxiety. Anxiety is a part of our life. It's supposed to be a part of our life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made anxiety as a part of our biology to safeguard us from harm. So a small amount of it is good. It's supposed to be there for us. But as our children age, parents begin to see them struggle through emotions of anxiety and fear. Children can feel nervous or anxious about so many things, and sometimes we don't pay attention to the little things that upset them. When the anxiety begins to hinder daily life activities, daily routines, and it gets worse over time or it doesn't go away, that's when we need to pay attention to it. That's when it needs to be addressed. So a little bit about the stats on anxiety. 1 in 8 children are affected by this. So if you have children that are suffering through this, having a hard time, you're not alone. It's quite common. Those that suffer from anxiety are actually at pretty high risk of poor school performance, as well as outbursts and disruptive behavior at home. They miss out on opportunities that they would otherwise get to experience if they were not anxious, because anxiety does hold the children back from enjoying a lot of things in life. And anxiety disorders often co-occur with depression and ADHD. Anxiety comes from many different types of forms, of which the most common ones for kids are social anxiety, generalized anxiety, and panic disorder. That's why sometimes understanding and identifying anxiety in children can be very challenging or confusing for parents. The one thing we don't want to overlook is any medical condition that might mimic anxiety. So if you see a sudden onset of anxious behavior, a medical evaluation should be taken into consideration by the parents. But in this, we'll talk more about what symptomology you can see in the kids to identify whether, it's social or it's medical or psychological, I mean. So understanding that anxiety is real, because kids have less control over their lives than we do as adults, they are more vulnerable to anxiety than we think they are. Kids experience more stress than we realize, and especially more than the generations in the past. We didn't have to deal with social media, cyberbullying, comparing our lifestyles, our lives, the things we have to other people, other peers, friends on social media. So they do have a lot more of the anxiety provoking things going on in their life than the past generations did. And that's why it's become such a real problem for children in this day and era. Stress of the home environment affects kids. We got to remember, kids hear and see most things that are going on at home, whether we're talking about finances, whether we're talking about personal problems. They do a really good job of paying attention to what mom and dad are talking about. So even if you think you're hiding stuff from them, probably not. They're actually really good at picking up on that and becoming anxious over environmental problems at home. Children can also carry stress from friends, schools, and other familial relationships. These can be more stressful on them than we actually understand. Children's anxiety can add stress to family life. It can be very stressful on parents when having anxious children at home. It is helpful to build a network of support consisting of relatives and friends so that you don't feel alone when you're dealing with this. So as we continue to talk about children and anxiety, I really want you to keep in mind that your child's anxiety is not a sign of poor parenting. And I want to emphasize this again. Your child's anxiety is not a sign of poor parenting. As parents, we do what we know best. We do what we were role modeled, and we even do our best to improve upon what we were modeled. And inshallah, we keep learning to become better and better parents. But it's a lifelong process. We are always learning on how to be better parents at every age. So, what are the signs of anxiety? What are we looking for? There are 6 main umbrella symptoms that we assess. So sleep disturbance, fatigue, irritability, restlessness, muscle tension, and difficulty concentrating. Other than that, some of the other things that we probe into, ask about, look at, when kids are losing interest in their daily activities, things that they like to do, things that were used to be fun to them and are not fun to them anymore. If they're complaining about my chest is hurting or my heart is beating fast. Fast heart rate is an indication, sweating, fidgeting, eating disturbances, whether they're eating too much or not eating enough, are also a sign of anxiety. When children are complaining of headaches, stomach aches, the I don't feel good complaints, the psychosomatic symptoms, those are definitely a sign of anxiety. If they're afraid of socializing or feeling stressed going into a new place or not wanting to go to a new place, are signs of stress. When we see them have angry outbursts or we see them have other mood changes, their mood fluctuates up and down very quickly, or if they're withdrawn from families or from friends, they just feel not ready to talk to anybody. We see them more reserved than we used to see them, are signs of anxiety. Other things like feeling jumpy, overly energetic, or even out of energy. Anything that feels like a change. If we see a change in their grades, a change in their attitude about school, or not even wanting to go to school. Other things like excessive worrying about anything and everything, or even worrying about doing things perfectly or just right. And if it's not done just right, they don't want to do it. They won't attempt it. Perfection. If you see your child struggling with perfection, that is one thing that should be a red flag to you about seeking some sort of professional help with um, having them talk to someone about anxious behaviors. So how do we help our children? Well, we teach them coping strategies. And the first thing that comes to mind is deep breathing. We as adults should be doing this when we feel anxious about something, and teaching it to our children is actually very important. So one of the ways I like to do it with the kids is have them smell the roses and then blow out the birthday candles. So what we do in session with kids is I'll tell them, okay, smell the roses as deep as you can. Smell, 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 smell the roses. And they inhale. And then as they're exhaling, it's blow the candles on the birthday cake. Blow, 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 blow until your lungs are empty. And then you take a minute and then you repeat that. Smell the roses, blow out the birthday candles. And this is actually a very good technique that children enjoy doing. And they'll begin to use this technique even when you're not around, because it is that relaxing to them. Other things such as parents, identifying negative self-talk. If you hear your child just, verbally beating themselves up, saying negative things about themselves, listen to what they're saying. Reframe what they're saying into more positive self-talk. So take what they said and put a positive twist on it to give it back to them. If you hear a child say, "Oh, I'm so stupid, I can't get this question right," as a parent, if you hear that, what you want to go do is sit with the child and say, let me help you understand this, because you've done things like this and you're so good at solving problems. This is just one you can't understand, but you do everything else so well. That's reframing it to something more positive. So identifying that negative self-talk and encouraging them to have more positive self-talk is very helpful to them. Things like mindfulness or calming visualization, having time to sit with your child if you see they're anxious, and getting them to visualize a calm place, maybe a vacation you took, maybe they like to go to the park or they like to go to the beach, having them close their eyes and visualize the sun and the sand and the waves. That will calm them down. It's a type of mindfulness activity. There's actually a lot online that you could look up for children, and they do really have a good calming effect on them. Listening to what they're saying. So this is really important. Listen to what their anxiety is about and help talk them through the anxiety. As parents, we usually don't give a lot of time to what the child's issues are, and just sort of hurry up and listen to them and then go off and do the next thing, or give them just a little bit of calm talk and then walk away. But actually sit there and listen and talk through the anxiety, work through it with them, and that really helps. Other things, using transitional objects like a toy for the younger children, photos for the older children, photos of family members, photos of places they've gone to, things that remind them of good memories. Stuffed animals, those work great. And in some types of anxieties, stress balls and fidget spinners. They actually do a really good job in helping calm down that anxious part of the brain. Other things, journaling. Journaling works wonders for the older children. And I highly recommend that if your children don't journal, buy them something nice and cute or manly or whatever it is. Get them to write their feelings out, get them to express. And Journaling on the computer is different than journaling by hand. I really recommend hand journaling because it's the mind-hand connection. And when they're writing it out, it really helps to release that stress. So they're working their stress out through their writing. The one thing that I've really heard complaints on from the children that I work with is we don't have a sense of privacy when we're journaling, because we see a sibling read the journal, a mom, a dad, an aunt, a babysitter, someone will get their hands on the journal. So they're afraid to write in it. So respect the children's privacy, let them know that their journal is safe, it's for them, and help them start a journal if they already don't do it. A worry jar, give them a jar, have them write down things that worry them or that cause them anxiety, cause them fear, and have them put that into their worry jar, so that it's out of them and it's into the jar, so that they're not carrying the stress or worry with them. Other things like relaxation techniques. If your kids will do yoga, or if you'd like to do yoga with your kids, stretching of any type, light exercise, floor exercises work wonderfully for this. Even meditation. And in session for our Muslim community, like to ask the children and the adults to integrate, like, a dhikr or prayer with their meditation. And children actually respond very well to that. So as parents, remember, your children are learning from you. You are their role model. So model what you want to see in them. And that's really important to remember because they learn from you. Modeling self-confidence and modeling calm behavior comes from you. So please do that with your children. If you see them scared, listen to them, help them. Talk through their fears, convince them that they don't need to be fearful, worrisome, or anxious. Give them a story about the time you were scared about something, you were anxious over something, and how you went through it, and how that's calming for them, knowing that that is normal to feel that way. And if mom and dad can do it, I can do it. So sharing the stories of your own self-confidence and your own ways of calming yourself down helps your children learn as well. Encouraging them to do things that they may interpret as difficult and helping them do those things. This will build their self-confidence. So don't do it for them, help them do it. Give positive reinforcement. Some children like loud verbal praises, like, hey, good job, awesome, high five. Others just like a pat on the back. It depends on your child, like what type of personality your child has. So according to that, give them that positive reinforcement the way you know your child would like it. Find the things that they're good at, encourage them to do those things, and then praise them for doing them. Even giving them jobs around the house. Let them know how good they are at doing those jobs and how proud you are of them, when they complete the jobs. And we all have, times where the children don't complete the jobs. Well, you don't have to give them a lot of positive reinforcement for not completing the jobs, but the times that they do it, make sure that you put in that best effort to say good job to them. This helps build their confidence, and it builds a strong sense of self. This strong sense of self helps curb the anxiety as well. Okay, we need to believe in our children. So believe in your children and have them believe in themselves. Empower them to make good decisions and do things for themselves. And sometimes they'll make the wrong decision. You'll be there to guide them, but at least empower them to take that step in making that decision. Don't make decisions for them unless you really have to, unless they really need to be guided. But if they're little mistakes, let those mistakes happen so they can learn from them, and sit and teach them what they should learn from their mistakes. This will help them calm down that anxious part when they're not with you and they're stuck in a place of making a decision. They'll learn to rely on themselves, believe in themselves because you believed in them. Remind them of all the times that they've made the right decisions, that they've done the right things, and they've overcome difficulties on their own, so that when they're not with you, they're able to overcome difficulties on their own because they know you're right there, you believe in them. Listen to their stresses and do your best to ease them. Listening is so important. They can have so many stresses from so many different things going on that we may not perceive as, big stressful things, but for them, they're big deals. They can have stress from just, for example, being in front of class, and answering a question or doing a presentation, or test anxiety, or even just going back to school, pandemic anxiety. There's so much going on in their minds that we really do have to make sure that we're giving them that attention, so that they can better handle that anxiety for themselves. In looking out for that anxious behavior, don't forget to pay attention to your child's feelings. We're not just looking for the negative behaviors, we're also looking for other displays of feelings and emotions. Helping them stay calm, helping yourself stay calm. So when your child becomes anxious about a situation or event, if you overreact, the children will also learn to overreact. Remember, they model your behavior. So be cautious of your reactions around them and model the reactions and behaviors that you want them to mimic. The other thing that we do is we're really quick to throw out a punishment. So don't be too quick to punish for mistakes or for the lack of progress in something. Instead, recognize and praise the small accomplishments, instead of just being quick to add a punishment to whatever they're doing. It's important to keep a regular or normal daily routine as well. But when we see the children are anxious or in distress, please try to be a little bit flexible. The flexibility allows the children to know that even if they make a mistake, it's okay, and they don't have to get anxious or stressed out because now a mistake is made and now they're going to be punished for it. We all have expectations for our children on a daily basis, but please try to relax those expectations when you see your child stressed or anxious. Children are already anxious over not living up to their parents' expectations. And when you relax those expectations, at times you see them distressed, you're actually helping them reduce the anxiety they're feeling over not living up to those expectations. And it really helps them think through the things that you'd like for them to do, those expectations you have. And then they'll actually want to do more of those because they know that you're not just standing over them, waiting to be disappointed if they make the wrong move. Plan for transition is a really important one. And that means, for example, in the morning, if you know that your child has a difficult time getting ready, allow for extra time. That's the transition from home to school. Give them, how much ever, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half hour, whatever they need, and incorporate that plan for transition for anything that's going on. So if you're going out to a party, or if, you have plans to have a play date, or for the older children, if they're going out to the movies with their friends. This is all pre-COVID stuff. Excuse me for a second. Give that extra time to them and to yourself so that there's not a sense of disappointment. There's not a fear of, if I'm late, I'm going to get yelled at, I'm going to get punished. So that reduces their anxiety. The transition plan will reduce their anxiety. So this is not to say not to have expectations. You know, we want to have expectations for our children. It's important that you have the same expectations of your anxious child that you would of another child. Like if you want them to go out with you, attend a party, making their decisions, conversing with adults, all these things that you would expect from your non-anxious child or other children, you would expect from your own child too. So have the expectations, but just understand that you'll have to go at a slower pace and a more calmer pace with the anxious child to get to the goal of having them meet those expectations. And the slower pace would mean you can help your child break down a big task into smaller steps that that child can accomplish, and then praise or reward them on that accomplishment. So whatever that situation is going to be, break it down into smaller things. So a strategy would be, if they don't want to go to a party, first go to the party with your child, or a gathering with your child, and agree to stay as long as your child wants to stay and interact. And then the next time around, you know, they want to go to another gathering, or you want them to go to a gathering with you, stay for a little bit longer, maybe add half hour to that. That's going at a slower pace. That's helping them adjust to that social anxiety they may be feeling. And this will help them trust you more too, that you're aware of their feelings and you're doing something about it to balance that for them. Another coping skill that involves you as a parent would be you can role play or act out ways to help your child handle difficult situations. Saying or acting out things, talking about things out loud makes kids more confident because they can hear you, they can hear themselves, and they can gain more confidence in that. So when you do this with them, you give them a tool to try when they're alone and anxious. They'll be more likely to try the let me talk out loud strategy to reduce my anxiety. And that's because you did it with them. And so they know, they feel, okay, when I do this, it worked. I did it with my mom and dad, and I can talk out loud. I can hear myself. I can calm myself down, and they're in control. They're able to get through that anxious event going on in their head a lot more quicker. What we want to remember as parents is not to exacerbate the anxiety. Remember not to minimize the child's anxiety. So we can't say things like, get over it, sleep it off. What do you have to worry about? You know, things that belittle their feelings, things that make them feel that, you know, either they're burdening, you know, their parents with these emotions, or they're causing them distress with these emotions, or they're not being heard or understood. So these words are belittling, you know, types of words, sentences. We need to actually validate their emotions and feelings. So remind yourself if this is something, you know, that has a tendency to just, you know, come out of your mouth, be able to remind yourself, okay, wait, I'm going to use words to validate instead of belittle their feelings. when they're talking about their fears, when they're talking about their anxiousness, even if you believe that their fear or anxiety is not real, your child believes that that's real. So listen and be supportive. They need to know that their words are being heard by the parents and they're being taken seriously. Children's anxiety is very real anxiety. We need to remember that these interventions are actually very necessary because children tend to grow into their fears and anxieties, not grow out of them. And that's really important to know, that they're growing into their fears and anxieties, they're not growing out of them. So when you see children going through, some of that symptomology that I talked about earlier, it's better to address it early. It's better to use, those methods of calming them down early rather than ignoring it and thinking, oh, it's okay, they'll just grow out of it. They're just at this age and this age and this age. And before you know it, it becomes a part of them if it's not tended to. So please remember that they don't grow out of them, that they do need that help and support. The goal is how to teach children to challenge and outsmart the tricks the brain can play on them by having their imagination run wild. A part of the anxiety is that they begin to overthink things. And when you're there to listen to them, you can help them understand not to fear their imagination and be there for them, reassure them, let them know that you understand their stresses and how to calm that imagination part down if it's really scaring them. Don't confuse anxiety with other types of inappropriate behavior. So I know we've been talking about, sort of like, okay, give the child a second chance, give the kid a little slack, let them be able to say what they have to say, experience what they have to experience. But this is all within, your own ways of parenting, your own rules of the house. So it's important to set both expectations and have limits and consequences for the inappropriate behavior. Just because there is anxiety doesn't mean that the inappropriate behavior slips right in and you're allowing it to just play out because the child is anxious. So make sure that you do have the limits and consequences in place. Parents who have reasonable expectations of their children and clear and consistent limits and consequences for behavior, along with the love and acceptance, are the ones that have, the competent, self-confident, and happy children. So we want to make sure that we're balancing the consequences when necessary with the love and acceptance. Whenever we can put that in there, slide it in as many times as you can. It's important to work with your spouse. So in all this, you and your spouse have to be in agreement. It's really important that you and your spouse have an agreement upon which way of handling your child's anxiety that you both feel comfortable with, and that's important. When you recognize that there's these anxious behaviors and they need to be addressed, they need to actually be addressed by both of you. So sit and talk about this behind closed doors, not in front of children, so that you can both come to the same conclusion on how to deal with it. It's also really important that one parent is not too easy, and because the other parent, pushes your child too much. Like, you can't have both. One can't be too easy and one can't be too pushy. This becomes very confusing for the child. And the child actually doesn't know who to count on. Who does he go to when he's anxious? Does he want, just that easy way out, or does he want to have, structure in place? This is something for the parents to decide. So please decide this ahead of time. Working together with your child's anxieties, emotions, and disciplining. This is all a group effort. So both of you have to do this together. This way, you'll be modeling teamwork for them, and you'll be assuring them that no matter what parent they go to, they're going to get a similar response from either of them. Do your best as a team, and please be on the same side. Set the rules, be observant. It's so important, because if you're not, your children will pick up on the fact that you're not on the same team and will begin to take advantage of you. And this actually becomes very anxiety provoking for the children. They get anxious when they think they have to go to the other parent, so they tend to go to the parent that's going to set the easier rules. That doesn't make for good balancing in parenting at home. Okay, so if you begin to notice that your proactive approach with like the things that we've talked about in being proactive about tackling anxiety at home is not benefiting the children, then please seek professional help. A mental health practitioner, if your child has an anxiety disorder, and if so, accurately diagnose what type of anxiety it is, what you can do to help, and provide your child the necessary tools to manage their anxiety within the realm of therapy. And as a parent, you can also learn strategies from therapy, become familiar with the treatment approaches that are going to be used for your child in therapy, understand your child's strengths and weaknesses, enabling you to support and guide them through their stressful journey of going through this really anxious time in their life. And they will thank you for it. That's what I have for the presentation. So I think I'm on time.
Yes, that was perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Chaudhry.
You're
That was
welcome.
a great presentation and a lot of great information. So we have a few questions between Munira and myself. The first question is, can anxiety be passed by genes, the genetic?
Yes, it can. It's biological and environmental.
Okay, so
Yes.
yeah.
So even if there is a biological factor to it, it doesn't necessarily have to, come out in the same ways as in the past. Let's say if it was grandma or mom, whoever, has more of that anxiousness to them. If the environment is controlled, and if the anxiety is addressed within the child at an early age, they are able to manage it.
Okay, and so the coping techniques that you shared with us would work whether the anxiety is situational or genetic.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
The coping techniques that you shared, like the coping tools, would work even if the anxiety is genetic.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So the second question is, we know that technology may cause anxiety, and technology is an essential part of our lives. How do you manage technology use to prevent anxiety?
Oh gosh, if I had the right answer for that, it would be so wonderful. The only thing we can do is manage it best according to, what we're dealing with at home. It's a very cautious thing to tread on, because we do have children react very strongly to phones being taken away, iPads, game gaming devices being taken away, and they actually begin to react quite negatively. So it's a balancing act at home depending on the child and how they react, and taking whatever that is away at a little bit at a time. So okay, a half hour, if you do this, and then 2 weeks later, okay, well, you know what, you didn't listen, we're gonna have to take this away for an hour. So incrementally, if we're taking stuff away in terms of technology, but what's actually very anxiety provoking is what the kids are doing and seeing on social media. And that, they don't like it when I say this, but it's about having as less social media context as possible. It's about, reducing, whatever it is, whether it's Snapchat or Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, whatever they're doing, just reducing that. When I'm working with the children, and by children, I'm talking about that age range that we're in, I have to ask them to delete something. And so if they have, for example, like 4 social medias, I'll ask them to delete one and then work through, filtering out who they're following and what they're doing, so that they're not doing a lot of comparisons. Life looks perfect, when people are posting things. And that's when it gets difficult, and children begin to get anxious over their own life and get disruptive, have issues with parents because the other kid has this and that life's perfect and mine's not. So it's reducing that. It's reducing the influence that's out there.
Okay, thank you. Munira, do you have any questions?
So you had spoken about the growing into fears, and if a parent is maybe doing some of the strategies at home, and when should they really consider getting professional help for their child if they're worried about their anxiety?
Okay, good question. It's when they do these things that we talked about, and they're trying their best, they're doing it, and they're not seeing results. When they see that the child's daily routines and daily activity is still being disrupted by them, even after the parent has put in their effort in doing those things, taking those steps, if the child's not responding, if they're seeing the behaviors actually get worse, if they're seeing a lot of the somatic symptoms get worse, like I have a headache, I don't want to go out, they're laying around in their room all the time, or they're just, pacing back and forth. When you see those types of behaviors that are disrupting daily life, that's when you want to reach out for help.
Excellent. All right. Anybody else have questions? We don't have any more questions in the box. You've shared so much amazing information today, Dr. Chaudhry. I think really tangible things that families can do at home, because the reality is all of us to some extent have been struggling with anxiety, right, throughout this pandemic, throughout this last year. And I think, as you mentioned, first of all, looking at what we as parents are doing, like how are we managing our own anxiety, and then thinking about what tools we may need to work on and how can we improve our coping so that we can also help our kids, because it's very difficult to help your kids if you haven't worked it out for yourself too.
Yes, absolutely. And the best thing parents can do is utilize some of these tools for themselves too. Take that time out for yourself. Give yourself a little breather. Take that me time. And I know that's difficult, especially like culturally, traditionally, we just want to put ourselves last and everyone else ahead of us. But just please, as mothers and fathers, especially mothers, take that little bit of time out for yourself, unwind, relax, so that you're able to tackle whatever is going on in front of you with the children's stuff, so that you can model that behavior that you want them to have. And if we don't take care of our own anxiety, we can't model that behavior for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dr. Chaudhry, I just got a question. Can you elaborate on how anxiety manifests physically, like tummy pain, for example, and what other things we might see in the kids physically, and how to address it?
Okay, so the physical manifestations of anxiety are some of those somatic things that I talked about earlier about like the headaches and the I don't feel good, I have a stomach ache. But when you actually sit down with the child, talk to them about what do you feel? Where do you think it started? Like, did it start at the pit of your stomach? When you're having this feeling, when you're afraid of something, you know, do you feel like, are you clenching your fists? Are you clenching your jaw? Do you feel anything in your shoulders? Are your shoulders tightening? You know, are you feeling something in your legs? Do your legs feel weak? When you start to get anxious and scared about something. Those are the physical manifestations that we look for. Headaches and stomach aches are a big one, along with, like I said earlier, the heart palpitations where kids don't understand why, but oh my God, my heart's beating fast. Or you'll see them breathe anxiously because they don't recognize that their heart's beating fast, but something is off. So they counter that with fast breathing. When you see those things, that's when you want to help use some of those calming methods to reduce that physical manifestation of anxiety that's happening. That is probably when you want to get more of the professional help, because even for the kids themselves, it's hard for them to actually pinpoint what's going on. So there's a series of like questions you have to ask and get them to a place in their head where they're able to actually begin to say, oh, I feel this and it started here. So if parents see that there's a lot of physical manifestation and some of these tools aren't working, I would really suggest that, you know, before it turns into like panic attack types of situations, anxiety attacks, that they seek professional help.
I just want to highlight something from what you said, because sometimes when there are a lot of physical manifestations, I think it's harder for us as parents to think that this is related to like a mental health issue. So maybe, you know, kind of a good thing to keep in mind is that they could be communicating something that is physical, but to keep in mind that it might be something that is related to anxiety.
Yes, and the good thing right now with the medical profession that's happening is that integration of mental and medical health. So even when kids are feeling these symptoms, I strongly do suggest, you know, that if it's worrisome, that children do go to their primary care physician and get a workup just to make sure the medical part of it is taken care of. And the medical health professional will guide them to therapy. This is something that I've seen grow so much, and I'm so thankful for that as a trend, where the medical professionals are saying, Mom, Dad, please take this child to a therapist because this is not a medical condition. Yeah.
Thank you. Any additional questions, Munira?
No, I think that's it. Thank you so much, Dr. Chaudhry. This was so informative. I think it's, you know, very topical and it's on a lot of parents' minds. And I think, like I said, you just shared so much great information. Alhamdulillah, this is being recorded. So those who want to go back and listen to it again, I don't know if you want to share your contact information, if people wanted to contact you, Dr. Chaudhry, if you want to maybe put it in the box.
Absolutely. There's no problem with that. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
So,
before so I just got a question. I'm going to read it out. Is that okay? Is this a good time, or do you want to add something, Munira?
no, this is it.
Okay, so and maybe you can then share the contacts in the chat box. So the question reads: Zoom hours are long every day for remote learners. Some of the kids feel overwhelmed and bored. Sometimes they live away from the screen or shut the camera from simply too much Zoom every day. How to reduce this sort of anxiety, if it is anxiety?
What was the last part, Mona? How much what?
So how to reduce this sort of anxiety around Zoom and online learning? And is that an anxiety when they are trying to just turn off their cameras or walk away from the laptop or just not be in class because of the long hours?
So it would depend on the individual students. I have some students that actually do get anxiety over it because they would rather be in person. They're not very comfortable with the Zoom atmosphere. So some of them will turn off their camera because of anxiety. Others will do it just because they're able to do it. And it's easier for them to not really, be paid attention to if the camera is off and no one's looking at them, so they can do their own thing. So it's a sense of freedom for some. But if I can't say it's anxiety for everybody in the Zoom situation, some kids are loving it and others are having a very difficult time with it. Us as parents, it's very hard for us to monitor that and gauge that, because remember, we're not in their classes with them when they're at school, so we don't know what types of behaviors they have. And we can't really enforce a lot of that, especially with the older kids, about how to do Zoom classes, because they're used to not having a parent standing over their shoulders looking over. So they, from my experience, they begin to resent the parents that are hovering over them and trying to tell them, do your Zoom classes this way. Hopefully, they'll learn by the reflection of their grades, and use that as, a method of reward for themselves. Like, oh, I can pay attention more and get a better grade. Or the other way around, like, I don't have to pay attention. I don't have to have the camera on and I can still get good grades. So it's more about, especially the older children, not the younger ones, about leaving them alone and letting them find their comfort in how Zoom works best for them in a classroom setting.
Okay, you have one more last question, and then this will be the last one and we'll end it. Somebody's asking, can anxiety lead to depression?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to say a little bit about how that happens?
Okay, I thought we were out of time. That's why.
Yeah, I know. Like 1 minute, a 1 minute summary.
Yes. Imagine when we as adults have anxiety and it gets overwhelming and we don't know what to do. Sometimes we shut down, sometimes we overreact. We have reactions that we wouldn't normally have if we weren't anxious. Children are the same way. And when they overreact and they get a stern reaction from the parent, it makes them go, inward and feel they did something wrong. Enough of that layering of, I did something wrong, I got in trouble because of their outburst or their inability to control their anxious behavior. They get sadder and sadder inside about the reactions that they're getting without being understood. And that's what leads to depression. Okay. Now we're done.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was an honor to have you and to give us your time on a midweek evening. Inshallah, for those who have any more questions for her or want to connect with Dr. Chaudhry, we will put it in the chat box. Thank you so much.
Guys.
All right, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. Have a wonderful evening.